Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sales Vitamin Podcast. We've got a special guest today, Dale Dupree. He is the Sales Rebellion leader. He is also a former Copier Warrior, you know him as, and I think he even toured in a band. But he has a great story. He's a great sales professional. He's a great mentor. Dale, awesome to have you today. I'm honored to have you as part of the really the first 10 episodes of the podcast.
The pleasure's all mine, bro. I appreciate you having me on.
Man, I know that there's a lot going on and a lot going on in our society. One of the things I wanted to kick right off on was because I know you've talked a lot about this is kind of what's been going on with the COVID situation, and then also with the Black Lives Matter situation that we've had going on. How have you kind of addressed this with your sales team and with your people?
When it comes to the pandemic, we were already positioned as an organization to continue to support the folks that we do serve virtually, which was already how we did most of our business. Although we did have on-site offerings and they did go away over the last 90 days now, 120 days now. They'll pick back up at some point, and so we're not concerned about that. But
Right.
For the most part, we just continued as usual. But the pivots that we made were, how do we get more connected with people virtually and use more of what's available to us that we're not currently taking advantage of? So even some of the things that we've decided on and put into planning have not come to fruition yet, but they will, because we look at it as a long game anyway. All the people that jumped right into it are most likely going to stop at some point, and we'll just keep it going.
Yeah.
More than anything, it's a strategy around what do people need, not what do we want to try and get them to do. So that's just how we've been looking at it. And I think that perspective works for all salespeople, if you ask me. So
Yeah, absolutely. From the sales rebellion standpoint, when you look at it and reviewing kind of the content and how has your background as the copier warrior, how has that influenced your role and how you go about your business?
Well, I will say that everything that I did as the Copier Warrior is what translated into the vision for the Sales Rebellion in the first place. I was thrown right into the streets by my wonderful father, um, who said, "Yeah, man, come and sell for me," and then just basically handed me cards and said, "Go on, boy."
Yeah.
But I had observed his selling styles and techniques my whole life, and there was training, even though it was limited. My dad was very conscious of the fact that we learn on our own, and he knew me pretty well at that point. He knew that there were certain things that I needed to be humbled in and by. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that he enjoyed watching just as much as he had to practice constraint on his own through his own, I guess, really ability to be able to step in the first place, and stepping back instead and saying, like, I'm gonna let him fail, do his thing, and then we'll learn together through that process. But if I'm the one on the front line learning, it comes out better. All the learning that I get in the first place. It's not that I believe, that you can't learn anything through somebody else's experiences by any means. That's quite the contrary. I think that is one of the most powerful ways to learn. But I think coupled with having your own experiences is extremely impactful. And so through the process of that and going from touring in a band to selling copiers, which, by the way, I didn't necessarily plan on doing for more than a year or two in the first place. And then I ended up spending 13 years doing it. So
Selling copiers.
Yeah.
And that is a very, and really, I'm in the truck rental business, truck leasing business, and the dealership business. That's a very door-to-door kind of, I don't want to call it obsolete because I still say it's there, but that's where you learned probably to do what you do.
Yeah, and I still do it, actually. When we fly out to other cities, or we have a sales revival, which is our on-site offering, I go door to door while I'm in the area. And people aren't used to it in some cases, but it's funny because you go to a copier dealership and they're like, "Hey, what's up, man? Because they
Yeah.
all still do it. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's a super powerful way to prospect. I feel like even though, yes, the phone is an easier way to get somebody, it's saturated with a bunch of people that are all saying the same thing, which is, hey, I'm with so-and-so company and I know you're busy. I don't want to bother you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just wanted
Yeah.
to get 15 minutes on your calendar. It's just a bunch of garbage. So
Yeah.
being able to connect with somebody face to face is so much more powerful. But it's why even in the Rebellion, we created what we call market tools that we supply our reps, especially those that are on the phones constantly, to be able to make a first impression before they ever dial in the first place. So there's a subject, a narrative, and some familiarity in that first touch.
Yeah. How would you describe, um, I say, hey, Dale, I love what I see. I want you to come train my sales force, but they're really not familiar with you. How do you approach somebody like that? Is there an easiness? Because they kind of know you may be coming at them with some real practical, but maybe a little bit different techniques. How do you approach those situations?
Yeah, typically when someone comes to us, which is about 90% of our business, when somebody comes to us, it's because they've found a piece of content like this podcast that I'm on with you right now,
That's
and
right.
they've listened and they've heard my heart, and they have felt something in that moment and said, "This could be what we're looking for." There is still a narrative behind the first conversation that has an agenda from both sides. There's no denying that, because we want their business and they maybe possibly want me to come in and train them. But
Right.
we like to take a much more passive approach to when somebody does say, hey, come and help me. We like to say, well, are you sure about that? And here's some content that you should probably watch and read and experience before you make a decision like this, because leaders need to understand, and they typically do when they holler at us, that we're not people that are going to sit here and tell them to dial 50 to 100 people a day and that somehow that's magically going to make them sell more. And I think that most of the leaders that do reach out to us, they're very humble and they say, hey man, I've been doing this wrong after I've read your stuff and kind of drank the Kool-Aid a little bit, and I'm afraid to do what you're saying, but I'm interested.
Yeah.
That's what most people say. But I think that really my success speaks for itself through a reputation. It's not about the dollars. I made tons of money. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's about the reputation. It's about the impact that you create. It's about the legacy that you leave. And I left a hole in my territories when I quit Copiers. There's no way around that statement. I unfortunately just got out and I was gone, and everybody is mad at me.
Yeah.
But
Where'd Dale go?
yeah, right. Where did all the cowboys go? So, but that whole concept is, for me, is what created the power of decision to step out of the realm of Copiers in the first place and do my own thing. It empowered me greatly to sit back and think, I can give this to other people. I don't have to sit here and do this just for myself and continue to build on my wealth. And but I can really, really transfer my father's legacy through my actions, through other industries, through narratives that need to be changed, or two narratives that need to be changed, and really be a blessing to individuals. So
Yeah.
that was our battle cry at the beginning. The rebellion is not, people see the sales rebellion and they think, oh great, here's a violent group of people killing other salespeople. Like, no, we're instilling hope into the community. That's our real outlook, is that we believe that our rebellion is built on hope, and that's what we carry with us in all things. We're not going to sit here and say that somehow the things that we don't agree with are okay to do, because we don't believe that. But we do believe that they
Right.
work. We would never sit back and say that what salespeople do today doesn't work. We would have a counterpoint of, it's not as efficient as you would want it to be. You don't have the kind of culture that you seek and desire, and you don't have any fulfillment. And 90% of the time, one of those things, people are like 100%.
Yeah.
I don't have that. So for us, that's the outlook of the rebellion, what it is that we're trying to do in the first place.
Yeah. Some of the things that you are really cool, really unique. Some of the techniques, I guess, if you want to call them techniques, the crumpled letter and the donut boxes. Just that one is probably just unbelievable. But tell the listeners about, what is the kind of the goal and where did you come up with those kind of things and the history of that?
Yeah, the origins are this, that I was on the phones and I hated being on the phones. And I'll tell you, I hated being on the phones because it didn't progress anything between you and the buyer. It just caused more conflict. And it caused an interruption in their day that was negative. And they would stereotype you when you got on the phone and started asking for somebody that they knew was in charge or a buyer, and heard your inflection or asked one simple question, who is this? What do you want? Right.
Yeah.
So, and as soon as you answer either of those questions, it's on.
Yeah.
How fast can I hang up is essentially what they're thinking. So I sat back and really analyzed the psychology of the folks that we were serving in the copier world, and said, number one, these are very normal people. They are people that we coexist with in our communities. That it's not so much about whether or not they're the front desk person at a doctor's office as much as it is that they're Susie that lives on 940 Smith Street in little old Podunk, Titusville, Florida, right? Yeah. Don't try to Google that address, by the way, or that name, because I don't think anything will come up. But I just made that up. But that'd be weird though if something did come up.
They're there.
Please send John an email and tell him to take this out if that's the case.
Yeah.
But the thought for me was, well, what is it that these people truly need? Well, like any community, it needs positivity, and it also needs the kind of positive disruption that it deserves. So we believe that people are looking for experiences most of the time inside of their boring and monotonous 9 to 5. Every single person that has some type of 9 to 5 job does the same thing over and over again every day, right? They literally,
oh yeah.
And Monday through Friday, it's the same thing, whether it's the same through the week or it's the same as the next week, right? Where every 2 weeks on a Friday, somebody's cutting the payroll, right? It's that kind of consistency that they're very used to. And if you sit back and you look at the clock and you go, oh, 29 more years of this, cool. It starts to really frustrate you and dumb down the process to some extent as well too. But then you start to kind of crave attention, right? To some capacity as well. You start to crave difference. You crave creativity. You crave something outside of the box. You long for it because you believe that you deserve it. And I believe that every human deserves it in the first place. So these experiential drops that we created, whether it's the Rebel Letter campaign, the Rebel resumes, the Rebel box drop, like you were just talking about, whichever one it is that people are specifically doing, no matter what it is, it will always get the kind of attention that you desire. Even if it's a no, it's the best no you ever got, because we're looking for a reaction. We are trying to gain attention, cause curiosity, and stir the buyer. And because we need some kind of response. When you send 150 emails a day and you get, at the end of a month, 4 responses and they're all take me off your list.
Yeah.
What's the point, right? Why are we doing these types of things to begin with? Why not be intentional with our actions and create an outcome that's worth it and it's relevant to the prospect?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, much like you, selling copiers or selling truck rental and leasing, differentiation is huge. And so talk about that a little bit. I know that's part of what you do and a big part of what you do, but it's so unique in the way you do it.
Yeah, I would describe it this way, that every copier guy came in with their black pants, their button down, their and sometimes 3-piece suits with their tie on, what we would call a sight seller, for guys that were beating the streets like me and you. And the prospect was used to seeing that. So you could be any color, any sex, and it didn't matter. They knew that you were a salesperson when you walked in that door, right? There was no discrimination of salespeople. It was like, you all suck.
Yeah.
We don't want nothing to do with you. So from that perspective, what I decided in my head was what kind of aesthetics can I create? You know, the experiences such as the Rebel Letter campaign, even the Crumpled Letter. I mean, in the beginning stages before I started putting it in an envelope, I would literally just crumble that thing up in my hand and I would go and I would deliver it. And it was a prop essentially. But on top of that, not just having a prop, but also having bright red pants on, you know, or jeans even,
Yeah.
you know, and like some flashy socks and some, you know, bright, shiny shoes. And the idea of doing those things is that it would cause an interruption. It would cause people to stop and to recognize you and to say, what is this? Even if they didn't quite understand it or like it in the moments leading up to the interaction itself, they still had a pause. And the pause is all you need. The pause is very powerful because that's where the brain starts to ignite. And you have a little bit more control, and I don't mean that in an aggressive or manipulative way, but you have a little bit more control about where the narrative heads from that point forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, if you want that crumpled letter approach and those things, get to his website. Get to tell them where to get that, Dale. Tell them where to go and get that information, because he's given you high level, but it is so powerful. And I think it crosses industries. I don't think it matters.
You're correct. We have people that are managed services providers, financial advisors. We have people in the logistics realm using it. We have people in placement, recruitment, right? HR, right? Anybody that's selling into a C-suite at all can use our letter. And to be quite frank with you, we've even had people adopt it for creating resumes to get jobs.
Wow.
So we've seen it even cross over outside of sales. So, you know, we know that a lot of what we're doing, again, just it nurtures human emotion, natural human emotion that people long and desire to tap into during a boring workday. So they all work, but you can go to crumpledletter.com to get the crumpled letter for free. And if you're really feeling randy and you're really ready to choose legendary, you can buy the entire Rebel Letter campaign, which is a 5-letter sequence. Because we believe still that even if you're dropping off one piece of interrupt marketing, sometimes it's still not going to necessarily gain the attention of the buyer to the point that they just pick up the phone and dial you or pick up when you call. They're still busy. You have to respect that part about sales, that there is no silver bullet that makes people just say, oh, let me stop everything I'm doing. You can't drop off 20 crumpled letters and set 20 appointments. But we have seen individuals do 20 drops in the sequence consistently and talk to at least 15 of those 20 people within a pretty decent time frame to get a yes or a no.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the return on that, the listeners, if you know, all of you that are listening, the return is exponential, and so you need to get to the website and check it out. Now, I know you've added some. Do you call them rebel leaders or sales rebels? What do you call them out in the field? I know you've added.
Actually, we call them squadron leaders now. I
Squad.
think it's
Okay.
kind of sick.
But you've gone through some growth and added them. I know I've seen them on LinkedIn and follow them. You got is it Joshua? Is that his name? The guy that plays
Josh
the guitar?
Deshay.
Yeah.
Josh Deshay. We've got Chris Watson. We've got Adam Snyder. We have David Weiss. We have Paul Castaneda. We have Sebastian Viviqua. We have Joy Carvajal. We have Adam Snyder, and we have Jack Wilson, the legend. And we also have Michelle Hecht, who is a rising star inside of the women's world of sales. She actually just did her first podcast with Fred Diamond Show, who that guy's been doing sales enablement and is a big name in the sales world for quite some time. But Gina, one of his counterparts, he was just on her show, and it was awesome to just see these coaches get their wings and start to fly. Because they're powerful when they speak. You know, we believe that God brought them all to us for a pretty significant reason. And the big piece of the puzzle for us is just helping them to become not necessarily only following specific rules and regulations of the sales rebellion, right? But to unleash their authenticity while using the rebellion system. So,
and that's pretty cool. How would someone know what would be the characteristics or the traits if someone came into where I work and they were a sales professional from the Sales Rebellion? What three characteristics would should jump out at me right away that would say that person is Dale Dupree, that is the Sales Rebellion?
Man, that's a great question. I almost want to reverse it back to you and ask you, like, what do you think would be would be the answer to that, and so that I can analyze you
Yeah.
and get a better idea of what my answer needs to be.
Well, I can tell you by what we've talked about, and just I've followed you enough to know. I would say the first thing that I would think about would be their caring, their heart, the reason they're there would be something different. It would come across as different. And it wouldn't be like you and I are talking about where you come in and I know right away they're selling copiers or they're a salesperson. That would be my first thing, that their differentiation would hit me right off the bat.
That's powerful. But I do believe that when we started looking for people that would basically take over the company, I mean, we're only a year old and we're already trying to do that, but that's
Yeah.
the point. The point of that is because we believe in people. And so finding these people that also have that same mindset, that aren't just saying, oh yeah, let me go to the Sales Rebellion and become the number one rep. Like, we want people that also on their entry date look at this company and say, how do I start to culture this around the next generation that's going to come in behind me? And how do I culture the reps that I'm coaching to do the same thing in their walks as well too, and not just be the number one rep at their organization, but be a change maker and be somebody that is recognized, that you must be training with the Sales Rebellion, right? Like, that's what we're looking for. We believe that that's part of the movement.
Yeah, I think, and the reason I ask you that is because, from a branding standpoint, just that DNA, man, when you get to that point, which I think you're probably, as the Copier Warrior and you, Dale Dupree, are there. But I mean, when you get your sales team to the fact that, man, I think that guy was trained by, Dale Dupree, that's a sales rebel right there. I could just tell. And so I was just interested in, hey, what are the top characteristics that would jump out at you? And I think you nailed it.
Yeah, and I would also say too, like, what we like about the rebels that we do train is that they are a very diverse crowd. That some of them come to us because they can't figure out what to do in their sales career. Others come to us that have been in selling for 20 years and they're ready for some type of change, some type of difference, some type of new mindset that they can mold themselves into. Not necessarily to leave what they currently do or their existence per se,
Right.
but because there's an emptiness, there's a hole still, and there has been, but they've been filling it by saying to themselves, this is just the way it is. But recognizing and realizing that they're, especially through watching my content and seeing, just the amount of people that agree, number one, especially the leaders that are out there, that they start to say to themselves, wow, I mean, maybe I could do some stuff like this and it would change the way that I look at my entire existence. A good example would be one of my favorite students, and I say that hoping that all of them listen so that they'll yell at me at one point, but his name's Jeremiah Griffin. For anybody that's listening, look him up on LinkedIn. He's with a company called Catapult.
Okay.
When he came to me, he knew that he needed to start making some changes in the way that he was doing his outreach. He wanted to start to find a little bit more purpose in his sales walk. And those are the things that we like to hear, bro. We don't want to hear, I'm trying to sell more. We like to hear, I'm trying to change my life. That's what we want at the Sales Rebellion, because we think that people should just look at their walk differently in general and stop romanticizing the Ferrari and start understanding that their legacy is much more important, the way they treat people, the way their reputation ends up becoming, right? And so Jeremiah created an entire personal brand. He's called the Finance Viking. And you can find his website out there as well too, and watch, an epic video. And if you watch the things he's done and you know who the Copier Warrior is, kind of like you were saying, you'll know that is one of my proteges, and one that I'm extremely proud of as well too. His results have been stellar. I mean, absolutely stellar. So at the same time, I think that a big key component to this is that people, it's not so much about whether or not they are like me already, right? Or like Michelle or Adam or Chris or whoever. That's not the point, as much as that if they're willing to fail and risk and try new things. That's
Yeah.
all Once they say yes to that, it's on.
Yeah, I saw where one of your sales, or your squadron girls was, she just graduated from a Harvard class or something like that. I saw that online, and I
She
was like,
did.
well, that's pretty impressive. From a sales standpoint, you typically, like you said, when you come into a business, they're not thinking we're Harvard graduates typically coming in there.
Yeah, we have a powerhouse. Our squad is a powerhouse. The stories that they have, they're the kind of sales success individually that they each carry with them and experiences, their outlook, that we all align on the way that we look at people and the way that we look at sales. But it's their uniqueness and authenticity and the things that they have accomplished or the failures that they have gone through that really make this whole squad very powerful.
Uh, Tell me about some of the things when you go into some businesses. Let's talk about, or even an individual. What do you see right off the bat? The top three things that stick out that really are lacking in sales today. And I don't care if it's going into an organization or working with an individual. Where do you typically go? Okay, I got to start here.
Yeah, prospecting falls short always. Understanding of oneself is always something that falls short, and culture
Okay.
inside of a bullpen. And that's with a group or with an individual. You can ask questions around those three things and find massive amounts of holes.
And why do you think, and I agree with you, but why is it such a lacking in corporate sales training that you see? And I mean, everybody I talk to, well, yeah, we have training. It's once a year, the annual sales meeting. Well, you and I both know that does not even come close to cutting it.
Yeah, they pay $50,000 for some guy to come out and speak for 4 hours and then hand his book out to everybody and shake some hands and then get a whiskey at the bar and go home. I mean, it's pointless. It's absolutely meaningless. So I will tell you this. This is what I would say, and I think anybody listening that is in the corporate landscape or even the private landscape, in regards to the size of your company, especially, this can be an issue. Is that as soon as I started to create a personal brand and the focus went off of the entity and the company that I represented and onto me, it was dangerous. And when I went into the corporate world, the only reason that I even got recruited to the corporate world is because of the leader that hired me. Once he was gone and I was still there, I became target number one. I had it on my back every day. I've never felt so disrespected inside of an organization in my entire career. And I stayed for a long time, a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I worked really hard, and I made a reality out of the success that they needed at that branch. And so I was tolerated. And that's how I looked at it, that I was tolerated. But I mean, I was spied on, and it was wild, dude. And because it was a threat. That's why they don't teach these things. That's why they don't culture you to understand your own authenticity. That's why they tell you that business is business, right? Because they don't want you to tap into who you are and to believe in yourself and to be the best you can. They just want you to sell a shitload of stuff so that they can make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
That's all they want, dude. And that's the bottom line. And until people start to not only recognize that, but to fight it and to say to themselves, this is wrong. This isn't right for anybody. It's not right for my mental health. It's not right for my community's engagement with me. It's not right for the friendships that I have. It's not right at all, period. Right. And it gets deeper than that, dude, because it starts becoming the 7 o'clock, bar time, because you left at 4, right, to get your time in. 7 o'clock, your wife's texting you, where are you? You're flirting with the bartender around the corner as if, no, this is okay because I had a stressful day and I'm a top performer and I deserve these types of things. We will go extremely deep with people on those types of subjects at the Sales Rebellion because we believe that no one's talking about them and it's a travesty.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what I was talking about, and really what I see in you and your organization is that heart piece of it. And not from an individual level and from a team aspect, but those things, even when you talk about the personal branding and the social media today, I know that's a part of what you do there.
It is fully. We have courses based around it. We have like online curriculum and teaching based around it. All of our sessions, revolve around it to some extent because, again, we're teaching people to be authentic, right? More than we are anything else. We're helping to culture sales reps around the new mindset that has been in existence for a long time. And there are some great sales leaders from the olden days that preach these things. You know, you can look at guys like Zig, and you can look back at Og Mandino, and you can say that at some point these were things that were focused on. But then the boiler room was created, and the Mad Men concept around, you know, just making money, taking advantage of people, checking out the hot girls that you've hired at the office, and creating a toxic and scummy environment that's despicable. And we still do it today in the year 2020, bro. It's nuts. You know, you brought up earlier the issue of what's going on in America right now. And I'm going to tell you this, because I can't speak on that issue because I'm not a Black American. I can tell you that I think racism is disgusting. And I can tell you that I believe that the people in those movements need our attention. They need our love, and they need our support more than anything. They don't need us to say things like, oh yeah, you know, what they're doing is great, but why all the riots? Why are they destroying businesses? We need to take a stand, right? And not to find a reason to make an excuse about the stand that's being taken and why we're not participating in it. Just admit that you're scared. Just like in the sales world, admit that you're scared to go to your boss and tell him that the way he womanizes and the way he talks to you and the way he treats people is wrong. Stop being afraid of those things. I stood up to my boss, and it was essentially how the rebellion was born, is that I took a stand and I went to HR and I realized, whoa, dude, the corporate machine is insane, because it's almost as if I don't have an HR department right now, right? You know, the way that I was treated in that process, and I said, I'm out.
Yeah.
You guys can do this without me.
Once you get a target on your back like that, you just almost got to throw your hands up.
Yeah, you do. You know, and it was wild, bro, because I'll tell you this, and again, I only say all this because I believe that, you know, just based on your podcast, the mission of it, that this will be anecdotal for people, that this will be a little bit of a vitamin, and that anybody out there that is dealing with environments where you have male leaders coming into a learning session in front of female employees talking about getting hall passes from their wives, you know, things that are extremely disrespectful and that are inappropriate, going on demos with you to see new clients, or even existing clients as well too, or prospects for that matter, and doing things that you get in the car and you just think, why did you do that? But you're afraid to talk about it. You got to start speaking up. You have to, and you gotta speak up to that person's face, and not out of hate or out of condemnation, but out of love, and then ask them to fix it with you, and use a mediator like HR or somebody else that will help, a boss, to get those things resolved. Because the more you sit on that stuff and the more you let it dwell, the longer you will be in misery.
Yeah, and you become complacent, and you start blending in. The point you were talking about, mental health aspect of sales. Let's talk about that. That's important, because all of the stuff you're talking about, if your mental health isn't there from a sales standpoint, what have you seen how that affects the sales performance? Even if the guy or the girl's a great performer, if their mental health mentally is being affected, what have you seen happen to the sales performance there?
Yeah, you know, they burn out. They drop. They become less inclined to be involved in the culture and to build something sustainable, and they just kind of use this temporary concept of where it is that they are. Me personally, struggling with depression into my sales career, from a young adult and a child into my sales career, it was very hard to contain and control. It was easier with my father, because I knew that my father was an empathetic leader, and that he would give me the time of day to be able to speak on things that were bothering me. And my depression in general, it wasn't a taboo subject like it is in some bullpens and in some offices. But I will tell you this, that there is a type of salesperson, and I am that person. They're male or female too, by the way, because I've met females in this same place, where we might look tough on the outside and things might seem okay, but your numbers might be the highest in the entire organization. But I had an instance in my walk as a top performer, making good money and about to make even better money with the projection of what I was going to do over the next couple of years. And I tried to kill myself because of the place that sales can take you, because especially if you battle mental health to some capacity and depression, outside of even getting into that field. But the field is so fulfilling, right? And that's why it's so attractive, right? But because of the way that we've cultured sales, and a lot of times it's not even about the rejection of the buyer, it's about your leadership. And it's about the things that you have to be, that you're susceptible to inside of the culture that's built around you. And I'll tell you that there was only two men in my life that kept me sane in those things. One was my father and the other one was Rich Johnson. And if it wasn't for the two of them, dude, I probably wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today, to just be quite frank.
Yeah, you've been, as I followed you online, you've been very open about that part of your life, that depression period, and your father's death, and how that's affected you, and those things. But I think that speaks to your authenticity, into that trust.
Yeah, and I would say that to people listening that are afraid of vulnerability or are worried about what people would think, is that this life is temporary. And the big thought for me, my awakening was in 2016 when my dad died, and I stood up in front of a sea of people. There was, the max capacity of the room was 900. There was well over 1,000 people in there. So there were people standing up, lined up against the walls, still kind of coming in through the doors to pay respects to my father, a copier salesperson, right? It was an epic moment in my life where I realized that our truths are important, because of the fact that there is nobody out there that believes in full transparency. Everybody seems to have a double life. And that's what imposter syndrome comes from in most cases as well too. And so there's it's a proactive approach. It's such a travesty that we have so many people that believe that somehow they're not worth it. Their story is not good enough, or, that their double life isn't that bad. It's all toxic, no matter how you look at it. That's how little white lies are born in sales. That's how, second and third marriages happen inside of, people that are professionals in these industries, specifically in sales. Yeah. So I would encourage people listening to understand that it's not even about me and why, or you, for a matter of fact, in regards to why we tell these stories and why we need to be transparent about them. It's about the community around you. And I'll tell you that I didn't ever feel alone again when I started talking about these things, because people would intentionally call me and say, hey man, I know it's your dad's anniversary, or I know it's his birthday, or I know it's Father's Day, or I know it's Christmas, and these things meant the world to you. And the things that you've talked about, or how's sales going for you this year? People show up for you in those moments. Somebody once said to me, they said, you're a great leader, dude. And that was flattering in and of itself because of the person that it came from. And they said, you're a great leader, dude. They said, but you can't always be breathing into other people. Who's breathing into you? And that nailed me.
Yeah, that's
in that
powerful.
moment, especially when I lost my dad. That's when I started to say to myself, I have to continue to surround myself with mentors, more and more and more mentors, as much as possible. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mentors in the sales profession. Kind of goes back to where you were talking about, hey, let's put somebody on stage, pay them a bunch of money once a year. But it does, the stickiness factor is when you take the Dale Duprees and his team and his people of the world, and you work with them for a year, for 18 months, for 2 years. That's when it sticks. And that's where it's powerful. Is that how you feel about that?
Yeah. In my mind, even, I think to myself that the most of the rebels that come through our system and that end up spending time with us, that, at a 12 to 24 month mark, they should never need us again from the perspective of learning the system itself, but they will always be welcome from the accountability standpoint for the rest of their existence, quite frankly. We've even thought about having a system that allows them to just continue to have access to us as a whole to some extent, which we're still innovating, but because we believe in a community, dude. We believe that, just like when you go to high school for a couple years and college for a couple years and you get these degrees and you move on to the next thing, that sales is very much the same, but that there is a factor inside of it when it comes to a mentor or a coach that people should just get. They should just be able to have that. So I actually do a lot of work with the University of Central Florida's professional selling program. Shout out to Dr. Bill Steiger, letting me be a part of the program. I've been doing it since 2014. And I've seen so many students come and go, but I've always made it a point instead of to go in there and recruit like everybody else, to go in there and breathe life back into the next generation and give them all an outlet to be able to call somebody that's just a few years older than them at this point still, because I'm only in my 30s, my early 30s.
Yeah.
So I, in my mind, I think to myself, this could be this. If I was 21 and I was coming out and I was going to a college, going into a sales career, and I had a guy like my dad that was only 10 years older than me, man, I'd be stoked to have that kind of interpersonal relationship with a mentor, let alone, someone that could kind of relate to me and what I'm going through from the perspective of the generational gap as well. So I believe in mentorship. I believe that everybody should be doing it.
What do you tell? That's a great segue into my next question. What do you tell that kid coming out of college, or that lady, that man that's thinking about getting, hey, maybe I'd like to get into professional sales? What do you tell them?
We tell them the truth, bro. We tell them that sales is one of the hardest things that they'll ever one of the hardest professions that they'll ever go into. And furthermore, depending on the profession they choose, we're like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
But we tell them the truth. We prepare them. We don't sugarcoat things. And the thing is that, the same truths are also good truths just as much as there are some things that are a little bit bad, per se. And they're not bad. They're just things to be aware of, really, more than anything. And that's why it's important to tell people what's out there, what will happen. I remember one of my students, one of my mentees, calling me and saying, man, I had my first anxiety attack in my life now that I've got this job, 2 months in. My first anxiety attack in my life, and never was an anxious person, never was a stressed out dude. And here he is calling me up saying, man, this sucks. And the thing is, though, that I felt confident about with that individual, and why I know that he'll be successful, is because I already prepared him for that. I already told him those truths. I never sugarcoated anything with him. And I believe that that's why he was able to call me and talk to me about it to some extent. Right. But at the same time, too, I think the real reason why we tell people the truth at that stage in their career is because they're going to feel a sense of embarrassment, for lack of a better way to really describe it, if they're not performing to the level that they wanted to, or the expectation of what they think their mentor might desire them to have. And so being very honest and transparent in those moments helps them to say, like, yeah, he told me this would happen, and that I can be vulnerable with him in these moments and go back to him. So that's a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Have you seen a big, that generation gap you were talking about? There's the Gen Xers, there's your group, then there's the Gen Z and the millennials. How does, who accepts this rebel, the rebel, method more? Is there one that you could say, what, if I was to segment our sales approach or philosophy, I have a pretty good idea when I'm in these segments that, yeah, they're going to get it.
Yeah, I would say that. So like if we talked about titles and positions inside of organizations first, I'll tell you that the reps crave what we do.
Oh yeah.
But what I'll say that's interesting is that when a rep starts doing what we do, their manager or the VP of sales then highlights them, like spotlights them, like, go learn from this person. It's real interesting. There'll be a week into our training using some of our outreach methodologies, having successes that no one's had in there in the last 15 years in the way that this new jack, or younger generation of seller is getting success, and they want it. So I think it's interesting, right? Because the younger generation, Gen Z and the millennials especially, they love the rebellion. They love what we stand for. They love the aesthetics. And we created it for those reasons. We created it because we knew that if we were Dale Dupree sales training, we would not be true to the community that we're trying to create and build. We're not here to highlight a man or a woman. We're here to highlight a community and build a kingdom. And the concept of that for us more than anything is, how do we relate? How do we become relevant? Well, what are the problems? And starting there and saying, like, if I was a rep, what would I want? Right? What are my biggest issues coming into sales? And what's interesting is that it translates back to the 50 and up crowd, the Gen Xers, the baby boomers. It does. It totally does, because they suddenly crave what we are giving that generation, because they don't know how to translate what it is that we're doing for that generation. They're lost.
Yeah.
I can't figure out how to get this kid to stop playing video games and go make cold calls. That's what people think in their mind, right? Why are they showing up at 8:05 instead of 7:55 like I used to do? They project their own success or their own habits onto people as well. We take people's story, where they're at, and we ask them, where would you like to go, right? And that's what we build with them. We don't sit here and say, all right, these are the fundamentals of sales. We say, what's up?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and
Have a
we
conversation.
let people tell us, you know, so.
Yeah, that's interesting. You have a conversation with them and things start to happen.
Truly.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about when you think of what you're doing, it's not a technology thing. You'd think, well, the Gen Z and the millennial, the sales rebellion is all about technology because it's, but it's not at all. It's we're paradigm shift. Yeah.
Yes. Agreed.
Well, I got one more question for you before I let you go. I know your time is valuable. And before I ask you that question, I just want to say thanks and just acknowledge you for what you're doing for the Sales Rebellion, for the movement, what you've put into your career and what you're doing. And I think it's great. I'm excited to have this episode for the listeners, but I just want to acknowledge you for that and just, keep doing it and keep doing what you're doing.
Honored by that. Thank you, bro.
And so my last question, you've got one sales vitamin and that's the only one you can give to a sales professional you're talking to right now. You're mentoring him and you can give him one sales vitamin. What's the one vitamin you leave him with?
The one vitamin that I would give to an up and coming sales rep, gosh, dude, I would give it to anybody. That vitamin would be their faith. That vitamin would be their spiritual walk. That vitamin for me is Jesus. And the reason that I would start there with anyone and everyone is because it's a crucial part of our existence. We often overlook the things that we don't feel like doing, right? I don't feel like trying to figure this whole universe and earth and human thing out and the spiritual side of it. And because we walk away from those things, we don't understand who we are. We don't have an identity even. We think we might, but that's because we're afraid to not. And so we make one up. We don't have an awareness of others. And because of that, it's hard for us to connect with another human being. It's hard for us to actually reach the end goal of a transaction in a way that brings peace and joy, at the end of it. And because of that, we have no situational awareness. And so we're constantly just goofballing through life, making it hard for everybody else and not necessarily meaning to do that. But it's because we don't know thyself, we don't have awareness of others, and we don't have any situational awareness. And I believe that all starts with faith.
Awesome. That's a great, that's a jar full. So everybody's got a jar full of vitamins there. Dale Dupree, he is the leader, the founder of the Sales Rebellion. You can get a hold of him at his website. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you, Dale, before we end this.
Sure. salesrebellion.com is the best place to go. You can talk to Robot Dale, the robot leader of the Sales Rebellion, and he'll get you in touch with me. You can go to linkedin.com/in/Copier Warrior. You can find my cell phone on the internet. You can Google Dale Dupree and listen to thousands of podcasts that I've done. It's 177. I count them. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. This will be 178 actually. So
all right,
actually, sorry, 179. I did one before you a couple hours ago.
So I'm 179. That's a good thing.
Yeah. So it's easy to find us. Hit us up on any social channel, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're out there at Sales Rebellion, at Leader of the Rebellion. You'll find us.
Awesome. Hey, it's been a pleasure. And man, I'm excited. I think that what you're doing is great. I'm grateful you came on, and I know the listeners are just going to get a ton of value from this.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you having me today.
Awesome.